we are live. Welcome to my video. So these are my spoiler-free reviews of the Team Thor series. You know, Team Thor 1, Team Thor Part 2, and Team Darryl. These were released between 2016 and 2018, and I might spoil the MCU leading up to 2016, but there will be no spoilers here for the shorts themselves or anything that came later in the MCU. Yeah, let's see. I believe they're rated PG-13, and yeah, I do love these three. Yeah, I decided to just combine these three into, do one video talking about all three of them because they are so similar to each other. I'd just be repeating myself, and they are distinct enough from the rest of the one-shots. But yeah, since these are the last three, this will be my last video on the MCU one-shots, at least I anticipate that being the case. I think a good place to start is just, I've spoken before on this channel about my love of certain aspect of my culture, Danish culture, one of those being Norse mythology. I think it is deeply fascinating, like, I love the way that Norse myth and adaptations of it are able to just transport us to, like, a long forgotten time that seems, you hear about it and it's like, was that really how things were back then? Like, it's some of it, it can't possibly all have been true, but just, yeah, and this particular series of adaptations takes us back to a time when people were excited about Taika Waititi getting his hands on Thor. I maintain that Love and Thunder is not as bad, as, in my opinion, as a lot of people think it is. And I said as much in my review. And honestly, on rewatch, I was even more like, yeah, this is fine. Once you know how bad the jokes are going to get, how cringe-inducing certain parts will be, there's a lot that works in that movie. But yeah, one of the most interesting things to me about this series of shorts is they are definitely not supposed to be canon. There's no way that they ever thought that this is how these things would actually be. And that actually, it's the first of, these, yeah, the first of these. Team Thor Part 1 is the first one-shot to not at all be trying to be canon. Like, some of them, it's like you watch other stuff that came later and it's like, I feel like it doesn't quite fit in 100%. They were figuring out, but with this, they just made the decision. And it has, there's two sides to the coin there. Because in a way, it is definitely freeing. They can essentially do whatever they want in these three, and they do. But the other thing is, of course, that essentially the only thing that is accomplished in these three is rapid-fire jokes. And the jokes are good. These are three very funny shorts, provided that you like the type of, that's always, humor subjective, but for what it is, for what it's going for, it is very well delivered, well conceived as well. And yeah, whether or not you think the trade-off is worth it is, of course, subjective. But yeah, like, it's very clear they're having a lot of fun here, Thor, I don't want to give away, but I'll just say Thor is not the only person from the MCU to appear here. Yeah, and they have a lot of fun with it. I mean, my primary objection remains I don't really like this characterization of Thor. I prefer, you know, what we got in the movies leading up to, before Thor Ragnarok. I do think some of the later ones, it's especially Ragnarok that irks me. Some of the later appearances by Thor, I do think they got some really great material out of. But yeah, there's a bit of a Army of Darkness thing going on. He's kind of an arrogant jerk who thinks he's the center of the multiverse, and you know just yeah, hashtag not my Thor. But if you're okay with that, it is really funny, and like I said, I still find it very funny despite the yeah. But yeah, I mean, it was very it makes a lot of sense in a way that they made this. It's really more the fact that it's so clearly non-canonical that's surprising. But Taika Waititi at the time, one of the big things he was known for was What We Do in the Shadows, which I'm afraid I've still only watched clips of. I would like to watch, let's see, there's both a movie and several seasons of a TV show. Because I do, that is one thing. So, yes, that is very important to clarify, since I've criticized some of his work. I love Jojo Rabbit. I think it is incredible. I'm not saying it's, like, perfect. I talked about, certain issues with that movie in my review of it, or my video on it. But it is, there's so much to love there, and yeah, I do think he has a real knack for making something that's both funny and also like emotional, which is also part of why it's surprising that this one doesn't go for the emotion. Both of his Thor films do. But yeah, What We Do in the Shadows, from the clips and analysis that I've witnessed, basically, what if vampires, did live among us, and there was like, documentary crew, almost reality TV kind of thing, just documenting their day-to-day lives, and juxtaposing this, very intense image of the vampire with just like, yeah, the banal, kind of everyday life kind of stuff. One of my favorite images that I've seen is one of the vampires is essentially Nosferatu, and there's a bit where one of the others is brushing Nosferatu's teeth, and that just is such a wonderful, I feel like that encapsulates what I've heard the show described as, again, having only seen clips and analysis. But yeah, that's such a perfect, that is, I think that's a good test of, like, if you find that funny, you're probably going to find these three shorts funny. Obviously, you're not going to get very much out of them if you haven't watched at least some MCU leading up to it. But yeah, they do a very similar thing here. Thor has a roommate. He's living in Australia, and he's just, dealing with everyday stuff. At one point he plays Connect 4 with Darryl, his roommate, flatmate, sorry. He's settled down in Australia. I guess because I believe Chris Hemsworth is Australian. I'm not sure there's any other purpose to it. The first part is set during Civil War, and there is a reference or two to Civil War. That might be as much as I want to give away. But yeah, it has the mix of, some of the jokes are very dark and edgy. Some of them are just kind of silly and just, yeah. I think they do a good job of mixing the sight gags with the verbal comedy and such. And yeah, it is basically, we're sitting down with, sometimes with Thor, sometimes with Darryl, and they're just talking about, how this situation is working out, kind of thing. Let's see. That might more or less cover. Yeah, the various performers do a really good job with the improvisation. I think in my personal opinion, this has a greater, KD ratio for how funny the jokes are than Ragnarok, and especially than Love and Thunder. That might just about be it. Yeah, I think they do a really good job of, all three of them are pretty short. I think, the shortest is like 3 minutes. The longest is maybe 6 or something like that. Or is the shortest one 2 minutes? I forget, but yeah. Which I know, impressive, because I literally just got done watching them. But, yeah, they do a really good job of just doing the jokes that they feel, make sense and they can do here, and then they end it. They don't try to, just go on for forever. Yeah, I think that might cover everything that I have to say about these three. Yeah. I guess I could just very briefly say, I think you'll probably want to have watched... Yeah, if you watch Age of Ultron and Civil War, then you can definitely watch Part 1. And I would say for Team Darryl, you'll want to have watched Thor Ragnarok as well. But yeah, you don't really need to have watched the others. Like, if, hypothetically, maybe you're watching this, you're like, I like Taika Waititi, I don't know anything about the MCU. Yeah, those will get you. Because there's definitely, there are some jokes that, context is extremely important in comedy. And the context here, they do not explain what you're going to be pretty lost if you don't. Yeah. I think that's everything. Yeah. So trying to think of a good way to close it out. I will say there was maybe like 1 or 2 jokes where they brought back something in a way that didn't really feel, like, okay, you already did that joke, though. It wasn't funnier the second time you did it. They did a fantastic job casting Darryl. Just, I mean, no offense to the actor himself, who's clearly very talented. He did phenomenal here. Like, he's sitting there right next to Chris Hemsworth, and actually, like, it should feel like just completely... It's one of those things that probably shouldn't work, but it does, because he gets it exactly right, So the following is not like mockery or criticism or anything of the sort. I'm saying they did a phenomenal job. He did, and the casting department. Because Darryl is, if the word working schlub were a person, it would be Darryl.